Welcome to the Shared Practices podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Richard Lowe, and I've got with me George Hariri. George, why don't you introduce our guest today, because we both actually happen to know her.
Thanks, Richard. Today, our guest is Kiera Dent. She actually worked at our dental school, and we both got to know her as kind of a part of our faculty at the school. She was on staff there. And she actually went to go work with one of Richard's classmates, Sage, and she'll talk about that in the episode. And they had multiple locations. And then since she's gone to work with Mark Costas, I know that's made you jealous, Richard.
Oh, my goodness. There was so much in this interview that, she has done since my graduation. I've been so jealous. She's done a lot of amazing things, and I think is part of why she brings so much to the table. So her journey and her opportunities and her things that she has to offer people right now are really, really exciting. So let's dive into the interview. So I have with us today Kiera Dent, and Kiera and I know each other from actually dental school. I went to Midwestern University in Phoenix, Arizona, and Kiera was one of the many amazing people working there and helping us and teaching us and helping us grow. And at first you were working in the supply distribution area, so that everything we ever wanted you had, and we'd come to you and you'd bring joy in our life as you distributed composites and everything that we needed, and teeth when we were crying because we'd messed something up and we needed to do it again. And then did you work, welcome to the show, by the way, Kiera.
Thank you, Richard. Good to hear from you again. It's been a while, but it's so good to hear from you.
It has been. And then did you do any other things in Midwestern before you left Midwestern?
I did. So after your class went across the street, that's, when they got promoted to working on real teeth, there were no longer those fake teeth to come and grab. After you guys left and went across the street, the next classes, I actually was able to help teach the radiology course. I think I kind of had started doing that with you, but they were pretty smart to let assistants start helping with radiology because we did all the x-rays in private practice. So I ended up doing that with the students, and I helped write a lot of the scheduling and curriculum and kind of helping get that into a flow from our perspective to help the students. So I worked very closely with Dr. Smith and Dr. Morrow and all of them. So
awesome.
Yeah.
And then I disappeared. I ran off to Texas. I'm working for the U.S. Army right now. That's my day job. I don't talk about that on the podcast. And then next thing I hear, you are working with Mark Costas. And I kind of did this double take of what? Kiera's working with Mark Costas, which is my dream job, by the way. And so I had to give you a call on it. You have a pretty amazing journey of some things you've done in the last 2 years, year and a half that blow my mind. So take us from kind of when my class graduated and our mutual friend Sage to now, and kind of how you've gone through this pretty amazing rapid journey.
Absolutely. It has been a whirlwind, but I'm very appreciative of people believing in me and kind of allowing me to go on this winding path of a story. So my husband, he graduated the same time that you did, Richard, in pharmacy school. And so he got a job in Reno, Nevada for his residency. And as much as I love Reno, Nevada, it was a little bit of a culture shock for me. And so, like you said, our mutual friend Sage, her and I had talked through dental school as far as me going out and helping her start up practices, because she had decided she would start up a practice right out of dental school. And so I had originally said no, because Reno was where Jason was going to be. But after being in Reno for 2 weeks, I definitely reached out to Sage and said, hey, are you still in need of help? And she said, absolutely. When can you get out here? So I flew out to Colorado and I worked back and forth. I'd fly back and forth for over a year, and it was a ton of fun. She is a great mentor. She's a fantastic dentist, great producer, just an amazing person overall, and really taught me a ton. So I helped her, and we grew her practice drastically within the first 9 months. And in 9 months, we bought our second practice. And then from there, I was helping her.
Which doesn't surprise me with Sage, because Sage in my class, she was previously an oral surgery assistant and was always the fastest, most efficient, just crushed it restoratively. All of us were messing around with our class 2 composites in sim lab, and she was doing anterior veneer cases with the CAD CAM unit that we had there. Yeah. And we're she's shows up early, gets everything done by noon, and then does other stuff while we're all still struggling in sim lab. So that's Sage. So it makes sense.
Yeah, Sage, she is a machine, and she is someone that I highly respect and admire. And I tell everybody, she is definitely a goal to aim for sure, but don't get down on yourself if you don't ever become Sage status. So she's very incredible, and it was an amazing opportunity to work with her and to learn from someone that I view as one of the best dentists that I've ever met in my entire life. So, and
Yeah.
I've been in dentistry for 15 years, so it's a huge compliment to her and what Midwestern was able to teach her as well. So we grew this practice. We would always look at each other and joke that, oh my gosh, we're just playing house, and like, we don't really know what we're doing, but we're doing this. And don't worry, everybody, we did know what we were doing. We just didn't know.
Well, but that's what it feels like in the moment, like when you start something new, and, when I start a podcast for the first time, I was like, okay, I'm just going to fake it till I make it.
Exactly. We definitely learned a lot. And so over the course of time, I definitely got a little tired of traveling back and forth. And then when Jason got done with residency,
understandably,
Mark and I joke all the time, Mark Costas and I, that, airplanes are our first mode of transportation, cars being our second. Like, that's truly how I feel. We're just constantly traveling. But after Jason graduated from residency, I decided, I missed living with my husband, and so Sage and I decided at that point that we would split ways. And after that, I had an epiphany shortly after I left working there in Colorado that I love the Midwestern students. Richard, I hope I always showed you guys that I put my heart and soul into Midwestern, and I grew to love those students so much. And so I went and actually spoke with Dr. Smith and said, Dr. Smith, I realized I had been helping Sage, and it was so fun to grow her practices, but I have how many other students that I know, and how can I get connected in with all of them? And that's kind of what blossomed the idea of Kiera's Dental Consulting. And I started doing independent consulting and working in practices. Once again, not knowing 100% what I was doing.
Sure.
Yes, I'd been an assistant. I'd been a front office. I worked at the school. I'd been an office manager. I helped run the practices and start them, but I didn't really know the consulting aspect as well.
Well, and someone was saying, did you own a little bit of Sage practices at some point, or not really? I can't remember.
I did, yeah. So I had part equity within them, which was awesome because Sage, when she originally hired me, said she couldn't pay me what she knew I was worth, but as a hook to get me to come out there, I did have part ownership in those, which was great because it incentivized me to work with her and grow the practices because I had skin in the game with her as well. So
well, I just wanted to point that out because that means not only have you done all of the positions within a dental practice minus dentist, you've also been an owner, which I think changes things for people. I think that's awesome that you've incorporated that into your consulting over time, this idea of being a part owner and having skin in the game, and how your success and your compensation were tied to the same things that the doctor cared about.
For sure.
It's not like, oh, how much can I charge this dentist and then leave? It's how much can I help grow this practice, which is where you come from.
Definitely. And thank you for pointing that out, because I joke with a bunch of dentists and I say, I was the smarter one. I figured out how to own a practice without even going to dental school. That's a total joke. You guys are way smarter. But I always wanted to be a dentist, but one, didn't want to get double debt with my husband. And two, I love growing practices with people. I have such a passion for it. So Jason graduated and I left Sage. I sold out of my portion and whatnot. I had another friend and I said, hey, I want to try this whole consulting thing. Can I just try it out on you? And he was super nice and let me go. And that's actually mine and Mark Costas's joint friend. And I went to Oregon and I just jumped right in and did it. And within the first month of being out there, we took his production from 75,000 to 120,000 my first month there. So it was a
nice
huge jump. And he said, Kiera, you were made for this, which was so nice of him to be. And I don't think that I am superb on every single level, but I realized there were some things that I started noticing within a practice that were just broken systems. With all that experience of working in all the different facets I have, I was able to very quickly key in, and then understanding the business aspect of it as well. I became very acutely aware of just some systems, organization, and accountability that need to be placed in. So then to continue forward, Dr. Smith and I had spoken, he was going to let me reach out to the students, work with the alumni. I started reaching out to the students, started helping some of them start looking, current students right now at Midwestern, and start looking to buy practices and helping them with that journey, helping do the consulting. And then through all that, Mark and I got connected, and now I work with him as his consultant and on his team as well. And then we also do one of my favorite things. We realized a huge need, and Richard, I'm sure you can relate to this, knowing a bunch of students, that the hardest thing a lot of students are finding is finding an associateship within a private practice that actually will afford them the experiences that they want. So Mark,
that doesn't suck.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I said that doesn't suck.
Exactly. So Dr. Smith, Mark, myself, we all kind of came together and we formed Dental Placement Pros, where I then work with associate students coming out of school, plus owner docs, and matching them into a good pair to where they're able to have jobs right out of school. And it's something we're very passionate about, very excited to do. And it's just a good network for all those associates needing to find jobs and not being able to do so. So there you go.
And that's huge because you're screening both ends, which is a big deal. You're screening the dental students that you're helping, and you're trying to find really good dental students that you're going to place in these practices, but you're also screening the practices they're going to. So it's not just, oh, we're going to help put you in just some random practice, even if the practice sucks. I think you guys understand which practices can afford to have an associate, because I think in a private practice doc sometimes will bring in someone too soon, or if it's their first associate, they think that they can support an associate, but they're not ready to give up some production and accommodate them and promote them to the staff. So it's a pretty amazing service that you guys are providing for everyone involved.
Definitely. And when I was working out in Colorado, we hired associates. So I learned that firsthand. We hired across the map, and one guy, we hired him because his hair matched Sage's hair similarly, and it was just a good look. Like, no joke, he's a great dentist, but we really did hire him based on looks, as shallow and funny as that is.
That's
so
awesome.
I kind of have learned the gamut of,
Did that work out?
It did. He's actually still there.
No way.
Yeah, he's fantastic.
I thought you were going to say like, oh, we hired him based on his hair and it just didn't work out because we didn't. Yeah. But no, I guess
work.
sometimes life just
so watch
works
out,
that way.
everybody. I tell you guys, like, anything can match people.
Have good hair. If you're going to talk with Kiera, you better do your hair right before you show up.
No, but I learned firsthand what it was like to hire associates and what needs were and how to really match them up.
Is it hard to know? Sorry, I cut you off. Is it hard to know if an associate is going to be any good? Like, is this a problem that a lot of owner docs face?
Definitely. It's kind of like blind dating, and you just go in blind and don't really know. So we had to learn to fine tune, and I'm sure there are a lot of owner docs that have different ways that I don't even know. Mark is a great mentor for me as far as how he hires associates and how he screens for them. I have my own personal experience of how I did it, and we definitely evolved. The hair was our first hire. He was great. So we got lucky. But going forward, we learned different ways that we would bring on associates, because we brought on a few associates right at the beginning to support both of the practices. And just knowing the need, knowing how to match personality types. And I actually screen for that based on personality types, different things both doctor and associate are looking for to make sure it's a better match. And then, of course, I offer a money-back guarantee on it as well. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that's pretty awesome. Well, regardless of whether it's a dental student listening to the podcast or a dentist who has a practice and is maybe looking for an associate, which we're talking about acquisition, so I don't know why they'd be listening to this season, but they're more than welcome to. I guess systemization. Reach out to you. What's the easiest way to get a hold of you?
So for that part, it's the Dental Placement Pros with an S.com. Dentalplacementpros.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing a little bit of your journey. And for my class who hasn't been following you, but we knew you so well in dental school, it's pretty amazing to see the opportunities and the doors that have been open. And now you're working with Mark and you're doing consulting for the Dental Success Institute and traveling all over the place. You've got a lot of amazing projects going on and a lot of perspective from being in different practices. So I want to dive into this idea of systemization, but more importantly, accountability. So really quick, as I interviewed Mark Costes and Dr. Scott Luna and some of our other guests in this season, I realized that anyone can create a system, quote unquote, for a practice, but really where the rubber hits the road is the accountability. And that's that's something that you've mentioned that you're kind of good at. So I want to hear your perspective on systems and accountability and how to do that right and how people do it wrong and how you help them fix that.
Yeah, it's funny because Mark Costas and I were actually talking about this yesterday of how you can implement all those systems, but if you don't hold people accountable, those systems can be the best systems in the world, but they don't move forward. Just like in personal life, I like to relate it back to us so we all can connect that way. You know, if I am terrible, I get on kicks, and maybe other people out there are great. And if you are, please email me of how you do it. But I get on kicks of I am going to be so good at working out, or I'm going to be so good at doing this, right? But if I don't have someone I'm checking in with regularly, I am so good at letting myself slip off. I can justify my way in and out of anything. And that ties right into our dental practice. And so I found with anyone, it's very easy on my end because I have no emotional ties to these practices at the beginning. I come in very, and not to say that callous, but it's very good. I am a cold-hearted individual, Richard. You know me so well. No, it's just I'm very objective at the beginning because I'm not in those practices. Now, my practices in Colorado, I was not objective with myself, and I would rationalize and drop systems left and right because I was in there. Not to say that I was doing it intentionally, but we get mixed in the everyday go and flow that we sometimes don't see that bird's eye perspective of our practice. And that's why having a coach come in and give you that perspective really has helped a lot of my practices. So, for example, take my practice in Oregon. He is an amazing dentist. He's fantastic on so many levels, and he is one of the best leaders I've ever met. But when I came in, there were just a few things that were going on that he wasn't even aware of. So I was able to come in.
Do you mind? Do you think he would be? I mean, we haven't mentioned his name, and
sure.
Do you think he would be comfortable with you sharing an example or two of things that, even though he was a great leader, things weren't quite working the way they were supposed to?
Absolutely. He hates getting up in the mornings, and he hates having morning huddles. I come from a very strong opinion of morning huddles being paramount because I feel.
What time is it right now in Arizona?
Oh, it's 4:24 in the morning. It is a good time, Richard.
Thank you so much for waking up at 4 a.m. to do this interview.
Richard, I love those Midwestern students far more than I should, I've decided. But
yeah.
No, thank you for the opportunity, truthfully. But so our friend, he hated doing morning huddles. And I am very, very pro morning huddles because it's a roadmap for your day. I feel like it gets everyone on board. We start our day clean and fresh. We can walk through the different scenarios of the day and just have a more smoothly run day. That was something he wasn't doing. And that's not a big deal per se. I think it's very paramount. He also, very simple things, his assistants were just letting people go out the door. So they weren't stopping at the front to pay or to reschedule and just walking out the door.
Okay.
But yet, you know, trust me, in my practices, I promise you that was happening more than I would like to admit. They weren't utilizing route slips, which everyone who knows me knows that I am a huge proponent of route slips. I feel like it's communication from the front to the back. It's checking to make sure those patients that are in office, every one of them has a recall appointment.
If a Midwestern student who hadn't heard of that term or some other student was listening right now, how would you describe what a route slip is?
A route slip is pretty much the new digital version of a chart. So a lot of offices are paperless. And even if you're not paperless, even having a chart, it's still great. It breaks down all their information. A route slip shows you the balance due. It shows you family members that are due for recall. It shows you if that patient has a recall appointment scheduled or not. It shows you what treatment you're doing for that day. And it also shows you pending treatment and pending appointments that are coming up in the future. So it's fantastic because it shows you every little key point that you want to be looking for. I feel like one of the best ways to actually increase your practice is to use the patients that are already there, right? So in those morning huddles, we changed his practice to looking over these route slips to see, does that patient have a recall appointment? If not, we need to schedule them in there that day because instantly we're filling our recall with our patients that are already there. In addition, maybe they're scheduled for one filling, but we could do quadrant dentistry on them that day and actually maximize their time, increase our production, and give the patient a fantastic experience because how many like to get numb 3 times for teeth in the same quadrant? No, thank you.
No one. Right.
So it maximizes, and then you're able to look to see if there are other future appointments. And if not, you have the treatment plan listed right there. So you know you need to schedule them back. So you're just really utilizing the patient's time while they're there, making a better experience for them while also increasing your business production as well. But it's just in a more efficient, effective way.
So you mentioned a route slip switch. So where was the handoff failing to happen that should have been happening?
Yeah, in this practice, they weren't using route slips at all. And so we implemented route slips right away. And what the route slip does is in the mornings at the morning huddle, they would go through the route slips and look for everything. So I have my hygienist assistants in front office all reviewing the route slips. So hygiene comes in, they go through their day. They'll make notes on the route slip of anything. Maybe a patient needs a night guard that front office knew that hygiene didn't know. So we got all work through our route slips in the morning, and then that route slip goes with the patient into their room when they come in. We confirm, we do the procedure, and then at the end of it, I have my girls circle the treatment that we did for that day, and I have them put their initials on it, and then write the next visit on the route slip. Then they go with the route slip and the patient up to the front desk. They recap the visit with the front office. So the patient hears it again. They know what happened. So the patient's not confused. They also hear what their next visit will be. They tell the front office, we need to get Sally back for an MOD on number 4. And we're going to take about 30 minutes for that. And also please schedule her for her cleaning appointment. And then, they dismiss themselves. Sally now has heard what's happening on her next visit, that she needs to come back for a cleaning. And front office now knows, and it's all written on the route slip, what to schedule the patient for.
Here's one of the problems buying a Form 2 is that you then realize all of the possibilities that you have with your own 3D printer. One of those possibilities is starting your own mini dental lab. Here's Dr. Paul Johnson and his partner on how they did that during their perio residency.
Well, my co-resident, Brian Saunders, he's a year behind me, and he was really on board with it. I kind of sold him on it. I said, Brian, this is what we need to be doing. And Brian started doing it, and he tried out one of my first prototypes on my old printer, and it worked. And so we ended up buying. Brian and I went together. We bought a Form 2 and brought our cases to school, and we're like, this is something that we need to just do. We worked together, and we have our printer, and we said we need to be reimbursed for this. We've been spending we spent a couple $1,000s of our own money each, and so basically Brian and I put together an LLC, and we made our own mini lab to be a legitimate business and have a lab to send out cases, and we called it, the name of the lab is Good Guides, GUIDDS.
Nice.
We thought, do you want mediocre guides, or do you want good guides? And
we want good guides.
Yeah, the answer was easy. So it evolved into the perio department sending cases, and we've had really great results. And now we know the residents are placing the implants. We're there to assist them if there's anything that is off on the implants. But it's been a fun ride.
If you're curious about all the things that a Form 2 can do for you in your dental office, go to formlabs.com/shared practices. There's actually a button there that says request a free sample. If you click that button, it pulls up a menu of all the different materials you can print on the Form 2, including dental surgical guide resin. By ordering any of those samples, you're actually supporting the show by showing Formlabs that people are listening and willing to take action. So go to formlabs.com/shared practices and request a free sample. So you said that a route slip was like a digital version of a paper chart, but then you're like printing off this physical slip that you have at the meeting, and then that follows the patient around.
Correct. And I apologize for that little confusion. It's not digital. It's not on that, but because everything's chartless, we don't have any charts anymore. So yes, you do print this route slip, and it's a piece of paper that kind of acts like a chart. So thanks for clarifying what that is.
So it's like their mini chart that follows them around that day.
Correct. Yep. And so then that route slip follows them to the front, and there's a smooth handoff between front and back. Ideally,
it's funny. One thing that you said that like made me realize how much we can get zoomed in on what we're doing in the dentistry. You said that when the assistant brings them to the front desk, they recap the appointment for the front desk. And so you said that the patient hears what went on. And this is just me being a doctor. I forget that patients don't know what's going on. It's like, well, yeah, I was working on this tooth the whole time, but they can't see it and they don't know. And it, so they forget or they don't realize sometimes what all happened during one appointment. So it's just little things like that. That's funny that I'm like, oh yeah, duh. Like patients don't know everything that's going on, even though we obviously do because we're doing it.
Exactly. And I like the patient to be very aware. So a lot of times dentists will recap in the room what happened, but then the assistant again recaps at the front. And that might seem redundant, but like you said, most people have no clue what an MOD is. Most people don't know what, a buildup is. And so just to explain once again, and they understand, it really helps the patient have that higher experience within your practice. Everyone wants to feel educated, right? How often do we, even being in the healthcare profession, like we go to the doctor's office and I'm like, I have no clue what they just said, right? And I feel like I'm a pretty well-educated person, but yeah, I don't even understand some of that terminology. And so I try to relate that back. Or, even getting out of the medical field, like we go in and have our car assessed and I'm like, I have no clue what you were talking about. I didn't even know that part existed in my car. Like, what is that? And so it's very similar to everyone wants to feel educated. And I shouldn't say that as a blanket term. I think most people want to feel educated. So if we can make them feel competent of what happened, they then can go forth knowing and feeling confident that they received the treatment that was discussed and understanding that. So.
Okay, this is awesome. So now we have a specific system, this route slip, morning huddle throughout the day, handoff system. And so now there's two aspects of accountability in my mind. There's the accountability of the team actually doing this. So they have to have the route slips ready. They have to understand what they are. They have to actually use them and write on them and sign them and transfer them and take them to the front desk and actually recap for the front desk person. But there's also the doctor side of the accountability, which is this doctor didn't like to get up in the morning and do these morning huddles. So where do you see that these systems that a consultant could come in and set up and then leave maybe, and then 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, 2 months down the road, it's not going on? Where does this break down and what do you do about that?
Absolutely, because that is the hardest thing. Even as a doctor, you can implement that, right? Without even a coach, you can come up with your best ideas and implement, because we were doing that in our practices in Colorado. But where I come in and where I think this is such a key part, so regardless if you have a coach or a consultant or you're doing it on your own, is setting up some type of accountability. So with this practice in Oregon, I'll do two scenarios. My Oregon practice, I keep the doctor accountable and I check in with him regularly. So every single week, and it's uncomfortable at times, but I'm very strong about, and Mark, he told me yesterday, which I think is paramount, that those uncomfortable situations have to happen in order to grow your practice. Like if we're comfortable, that means we're not growing, right? So those uncomfortable moments are very big in my world. So I would make sure I followed up with him to be accountable. So he knew I was calling him to see how morning huddles were going, to see how route slips were going. And I also, before I left, I implemented checks to make sure these things weren't getting forgotten. So I send out goals for each department of what their goal is to contribute to this. I also set up forms or systems before I leave. So they had a night sheet at the end of the day that specifically talked about route slips. And now I want to also point out, when I came in, these were ideas that I had, but I didn't just go in and dump and implement. I had the whole team contribute to what we were going to do within the vision, so they were a part of that. And it's very key to get your whole team on board, because then they're more likely to follow through. So the accountability piece came in. I put in all the checks and balances before I left. Everyone knew what they were accountable for, so the expectation was very clear with the measures of how we were going to track that. And then I kept the doctor accountable for that practice. So his responsibility then was to keep his team accountable. And that's how that accountability worked within that practice. And it worked very well because he knew I would call and check in with him. So it was just that key piece of having, just like if I know I'm going to the gym and I know someone's calling me every day that I have to be there, I'm going to be much more likely to go every morning as opposed to letting it slip by. So,
okay. What does this look like and you said it's uncomfortable, which I want to dwell on that for a moment, because I think this is one of the reasons we don't hold people accountable, is because it's hard and it's a little bit confrontational, and it's easy to buy into the excuses. And I think that's one of the reasons that being in a practice and being emotionally involved, you see like, oh, well, yeah, our assistant didn't take this patient up to the front desk and do the route slip because this patient had this problem or it was a long procedure, so we just didn't do it. And then that turns into, doing that more often and then not at all. It's easy to buy into the excuses when you're kind of there and part of the situation. So what does that feel like? If I was the doctor and you called me and then I'm like, well, okay, so we did all right with the route slips this week, but, this, and this, but, we're going to do better. Like, what would you do to hold someone accountable if they're not doing it?
I'm ruthless, Richard. I FaceTime and make you do 20 push-ups right then. I'm just kidding. Don't do that.
No.
I know that things happen. Life happens. But the point behind it is I figure out the doctor's goal. What is your goal at the end of the day? What do you want to achieve? This doctor wanted to increase his production. Okay, perfect. Well, so great. Morning huddles didn't happen. That's not okay in my book. So I say, okay, great. If you want to move forward in that, we discuss, you see the value of morning huddles. Next week, I expect perfect attendance. And I set that expectation. And that might sound calloused, but at the same time, when I go and I'm trying to achieve a goal, I don't want someone who's just going to let me slide on by because I'm going to get down a slippery slope. So I am very strong and adamant at the beginning, especially to make sure. Now, we implemented this back in November and it's now March. I do not call him every week and check in and see how route slips are going.
No.
I know they're going well. But so for the first time, while it's that uncomfortable moment, usually it's that first month of getting through that awkward adjustment, I am very, very pro and strict on keeping people accountable for those different aspects. Another example is I have a practice in Texas, and that practice, they wanted to improve their budget on supplies. They said, Kiera, we're really struggling. That's an area we're paying a lot of money in that's excessive. So we made a plan of how to do the budget together. And then I said, okay, every Friday I'm calling and I need to see your spreadsheet of what your budget looks like. And she said, no, don't make me do that. She's like, I don't want to report to you, Kiera. And I said, okay, that's fine. You don't have to. How would you like to go about it? And she said, no, I know I have to report. And guess what? Yesterday, she texted me and said, my budget's already at this point. This is where I am, because she knew I would be calling her. So it's almost that uncomfortableness that doesn't have to be uncomfortable. It's just pushing you as the doctor, as the owner, one step further, that really you can do that. And sometimes it's just learning and having someone believe that you can do it is all you really need. But then also as a dentist, I used an example before of a bunch of pencils that I had put on people's hands. So there's a whole slew of them, probably 20 pencils on the top portion of your hand. And I said, throw those up in the air and catch them with one hand. Well, you've got 20 pencils. Clearly, a lot of them drop on the floor. You caught maybe 2 or 3 of them. Sure. And as the dentist, you are so focused in on seeing that patient, making sure things are going through that. A lot of times you forget these bigger picture items that take you from point A to point B. And that's where I come in, is that accountability. So then the next part of that example is I would wrap a rubber band around all those pencils and tell you to throw those up in the air and catch them. You can do it at that point. And the idea behind it is sometimes you get so focused in on 1 or 2 things that you miss the 15 other things that you should be seeing. So if you have someone come in, keep you accountable for all those extra pieces, all those pieces then are able to come together and be more accounted for in a simple, easy way. So it doesn't have to be uncomfortable, maybe for the first couple of times, but then beyond that, it just becomes routine and it's not even a question anymore.
Awesome. Well, and it sounds like the way that you handle it, I mean, you're not trying to make this uncomfortable. You're trying to make it be something that they know they want this goal. They want this objective. You've got buy-in on from the team, from the doctor. This is what they want. You're just trying to help them get to where they want to go. And if you've got that as a common understanding at the beginning versus like, here's the system you guys need to implement because I know better, and this is what you need to do, and then they never really wanted it in the first place, I think that's when it maybe becomes a little bit more uncomfortable, because there's resistance they're not voicing. They're kind of holding this internal like, well, maybe this isn't the best way to do it. But when you guys have started it and created this system from the ground up, knowing that you've got the same goal, then you're just doing the thing that we don't have anyone to do normally, which is we don't have, as a doctor in our own practice, someone holding us accountable. So that's awesome.
Well, and it's one of those things, just to quickly tie in, because I think a lot of doctors might be listening and say, oh, but I have my office manager. Why do I need someone else? And yes, but I have found, and I'm sure we all see this, within our own families, it's a good example. Like if my husband tells me to do something, I'm way more able to, I'm much more comfortable telling him, I'm not going to do that. That's not really what I want to do, because we are so closely connected. Similar with a dental family, you're so closely connected that a lot of times having that external person, that then it's like, oh, well, how do we say no to that? Or how do we push back? Because I'm not always in there. So it's a really good person who's just kind of that outside image. And it doesn't mean I have to be there all the time. It's just that good person on the outside to kind of push forward things that it's harder to say no to or harder to give pushback to. And trust me, world, I am not a mean person. I come through very,
You're
and
so
then also
mean, Kiera.
I know, Richard, you can tell the world everything you want to know about me. That's fine. Later,
right?
When I'm not on, and you can get the nitty gritty.
She beats me. No.
Do you want more teeth? No.
No.
But I also think going along with that accountability piece, keeping them all attached. But then I also give them the out of try it for 1 month. And if it doesn't work, let's fine tune it. But at least let's start for 1 month. And that's how I get some good acceptance without the tug back typically.
For sure. And the point you made about the office manager, I mean, you cut the office manager's checks. So it's hard for the office manager to turn around and tell you like, hey, doc, you got to be doing this. And maybe you've got someone with a really strong personality that's going to do that. But they, like you said, they're also emotionally involved and in the day-to-day thing and trying to catch all those pencils. So this was awesome. I loved this conversation because we got really specific with some things that you've implemented and then accountability around that. And I think that's a great example and a great model for doctors and something we all need to work on. And meeting Mark Costes and seeing how he does his mastermind group and seeing how he sets up systems and holds people accountable, I've realized that like this is the piece that doctors are missing more than education. And so ironically, like podcasts are great at delivering information in an efficient, effective manner when you're on the go and doing all these things, but they are like zero accountability. You can listen to 40 podcasts and just have all this knowledge of, oh yeah, now I can do this, and the other, but actually implementing is totally not going to be transferred via a podcast. So it's something that I want to move eventually in the direction that kind of you and Dr. Costes are in, which is helping people get where they want to go anyways on a one-on-one accountability type way. So this has been a lot of fun. Okay. So
awesome.
I want to move on to acquisitions. So we're hitting both topics of this season in this one interview. So you have helped Sage. Did she do 2 acquisitions or 2 startups or 1 and 1? And then I think some other people you've helped as well. And I want to hear your perspective on new, fresh out of school dental students acquiring or doing startups and what they run into and what their barriers are and how to get around those. So that was like 7 questions in one. So go.
That's okay. You're good. So I got really lucky and Sage took a chance on me and brought me in. By the time I came in July to work with her, she had already gone through the LOI, the chart audits, all of that, and already had her practice set up the first one. So I kind of didn't get to see a lot of it at the beginning. So super nice of her to just bring me in on that. And I can never pay her back or tell her thank you enough for that opportunity that she gave me. But then on the next one, when we bought our next practice, I was heavily involved in that from seeing the beginning, the LOIs, working with the banker, all those different things. So it was a very awesome experience. And then in the time that I have since left, she's acquired 2 more practices and I'm still working with her.
Control.
I know she's fantastic. And, she's working on more and more and she will just continue to grow forever. And I could not be more proud of her. So I saw that acquisition, transitioning out a doctor, bringing in a new team, all of that. And it's a whirlwind of a life. And not to mention, when I did start with Sage, our building was being torn down. So by October 1st, I started July, I think 5th. And then to October 1st, we had to move our entire practice to a new location that we were building up as well. So the whole construction, the transitioning of patients, moving them down to another practice. We did all that. And that's when we thought we were playing house.
She was acquiring one practice while at the same time moving locations on the first one? Or was the new acquisition, you've bought it and now you're moving it? How was that working?
It was our first practice. was in a home in Denver that was being torn down by October. So we had to move that whole practice to a new location. Well, the new location wasn't built. So Sage had done a ton of work in dental school and had, the architect already done, but then I helped her with all the construction, moving the patient base down there. And we really didn't know what we were doing, but we did it and it was awesome. And it was a huge success. And so I learned all that aspect as well very quickly. We also switched software systems. So we went from SoftDent to Dentrix and did that whole transition before October when we moved to the new location. And then when we bought our second practice in April, we then did some different transitions in that point. So 2 different experiences with Sage. But then from there, I also have helped students. Right now, I have 2 students that one's about to graduate and one graduated the same year you did, Richard. And they contacted me in the beginning of February, trying to decide if they wanted to do the associateship or if they should do ownership. And just in a brief interview with them, I felt very strongly that they were prime candidates for ownership. They had the knowledge, they had the skills, they had the speed, the confidence of being owners. And so I walked them through, this is how you find a broker. This is how we get the funding. This is how we do an LOI. This is how we chart audit. This is how we do our due diligence. And we flew out to Texas together, all 3 of us, and I went and helped them do all of that. And they submitted an LOI within a month. And the practice right now is in the closing in hopes that we get that one. And if not, we've got a few others that we've got lined up. So they're another group that I'm helping. I have some other students right now, and we are partnering in a different way to help them buy their practice. And so my big thing with all of this is giving people the confidence, the skills, and the tools to be able to realize that they can buy straight out of school. And I'm going to help coach them and lead them and work with them in whatever capacity to be able to go from student to owner. I have another student I'm working with who's been out of school for a year, went corporate, and is now ready to buy. And so I'm helping him go through all the prospectuses and the LOIs and all of that. And that honestly is a huge passion of mine because once again, I love these students, not to say other students, because gosh, Richard, we might scare anyone who's not Midwestern that I won't love them as much and help them as much. But it's the principle behind, I feel so strongly that students get taught so much in dental school, but this piece of the acquisition part is missed out a lot of times. And it's no fault of the dental schools. It's just so much, and not everyone's going to go acquisition. So let's invest our time in what everyone will be doing.
Right.
So if I can be a resource for people in any way, shape, or form, like I offer free consults to students all the time, of if you're interested in acquiring a practice, or even if you're not a student and you're an associate wanting to acquire a practice, like let's chat about it and let me help you get the pieces and the tools, and also be someone who's not an intimidating dentist or an owner. I'm just Kiera, and you can ask me any question. I don't even know what an LOI is, Kiera. I don't even understand what aging report is. I don't understand what all those different pieces are. I am Kiera, and I'm here to help you. And I'm not someone who's very intimidating that you feel knows everything. You can ask me any question, and I will not ever make you feel dumb or that you didn't know that. And I think that's what so many students need to acquire practices.
I remember when I first heard that 20% of your patients, no matter what you do, are probably not going to accept treatment. Another 20% probably will, just because they're inherently trusting and believe in dentistry. And it's the 60% in between that we kind of have to work with. Just knowing that 20% exists that isn't going to accept treatment actually makes me feel a whole lot better about presenting treatment and getting shot down sometimes. This course from Spear Education, called Filtering Patients into Your Dental Practice by Dr. Gary DeWood, goes into this idea of treating patients differently based on their needs and who they are.
The Spear model encompasses understanding that patients come to us for different reasons and with very different expectations. Treating everyone the same actually is one of the greatest inequalities that there can be, because people are not the same. In fact, in a business, if everyone was treated exactly the same, we would have one product to offer. The Spear model, remember, is a pyramid. And in the pyramid, we have groups of patients. Our first group is a reactive group of patients.
To understand how to better filter patients into your dental practice, go to speareducation.com and take this course. Sign up for an extended guest pass by mentioning the Shared Practices podcast and use the promo code LOW, LOW200, LOW200 for $200 off your annual membership. That's awesome. One of the things that you said that I loved that you shared was that when you and Sage transitioned your patients from one place to the other, you said, we had no clue what we were doing. And I want to point out that no matter how well prepared you are and no matter how many things you do, like part of ownership is not knowing and having to figure things out. And it's not going to be necessarily perfect, but you get things done and you do figure it out and you move forward. And I think a lot of people are sometimes scared of that, but when it comes down to it, you're just in the moment. You just got to do it. Okay, we're going to do it. And you're never going to be 100% ready and confident because you've never done any of these things. So all of them are going to be new. So
right.
That's one of those aspects of it that you could go be an associate for 5, 6, 7 years. Sure, your clinical dentistry maybe is more confident, but you still have never acquired a practice. So it's always going to be a leap. So I think you are in favor of, for the motivated, driven individuals who are kind of on the fence, that doing this early is better than waiting and waiting and waiting. Would you agree with that?
I think yes and no. My friend in Oregon, he was an associate, and he told me, gosh, Kiera, it's like, I wish I would have ripped the Band-Aid off sooner, because I didn't know what I was doing even after I'd been an associate, like you said. But I also want to caution that sometimes, I think it depends on the individual. There are some that I would say, yes, jump, you can do this, like, let's go. And, Sage and I, we didn't know what we were doing. And I wish I would have had a Kiera that could have been like a leading overseer that could have helped me avoid a lot of pitfalls that I ran into, which is why I love to do what I do now. But at the same time, there are some that like associateship does work well. So I think it's just on an individual basis. I believe that we all within ourselves know what we're capable of doing. But if you know that at some point you'll be an owner, obviously I don't want to give bad advice, but I do think sometimes it's better just to jump, because you have to learn eventually, and why not learn sooner than later? I read an article of talking about, and this is clearly from financial perspective, but the benefits of owning so much sooner than just being an associate. And I do coach associates as well. So while you're in your associateship, how you can make the most of it to become more prepared to become an owner doc while you're doing your associateship. I do kind of a step-by-step map to walk them through as well, so they get the most out of their associateship. But I think it is a case by case, but I am always pro ownership, always pro. So
okay, awesome. No, and that's you're in the right place. You can be a little bit bold about that, because I think if anyone's listening still into season 2, they know that's the direction this podcast is heading. So you can say pretty boldly, yes.
Okay. I don't want to tell somebody who has no confidence to go buy a practice. That would be a very stressful thing for me.
that would be season 1. Was kind of, we delved into like, is this worth it for me? And am I ready for this? And how long should I wait and all of that? So now we're diving into the actual acquisition. What parts of the acquisition have you seen people get tripped up on or have problems with, or delays that they could have either done differently, or you wish that you guys had done, you'd learned from something that went wrong, or that something went really well and you're glad you did it that way?
Yeah, those are some good questions, because the number one thing I see, people don't really know where to start. That's a big issue. They don't know where to even begin when they're ready to buy a practice. And so, walking them through, getting them connected with all the different people, brokers, lenders, figuring that all out. And then right now the market, and it could change in a few years, I'm not sure, but right now the market in a lot of places that people want to live, rural is a totally different story. If you want to go rural, there are practices that just sit on the market for a long time. Right. But if you want to go to a decent place, the market's hot right now, and they just come and go so quickly. So it's, when you decide you're ready to buy, it's acting quickly a lot of times is what I'm seeing from the people I'm working with right now actively, that when you commit, if it's a good buy, you need to be submitting that LOI, and then we do our due diligence after that to make sure it's exactly what we want it to pan out with. But so many people are so hesitant to jump, and not to say to pressure you in, because the worst thing we could do is buy a bad practice that has a bunch of garbage in the back end that we didn't do our due diligence finding. But it's really just jumping, and then, we get everything into place when you're ready to be at that point. I mean, like I mentioned, those students that I'm helping in Texas, it was February to March, and it was 1 month, and we had everything. We had our funding, our brokers. We were ready to go. So as soon as we found a practice, we were ready to submit our LOI, and we weren't dilly-dallying around. And that's what I've seen a lot of, is when we keep waiting, we keep missing the practices, but also not being done in making sure the practice is a good, safe practice for you to buy.
Okay, so let's say that I want to start now, and I'm looking. Obviously I can't because I'm in the Army. But say that I were to want that. What would I want to do with? Who would I want on my team ready to go? What would you want in place ready to go so that if a good opportunity comes, you can pull the trigger? What are the steps to be ready so that I can quickly assess, submit an LOI, and then be able to move forward with that acquisition?
You want to have your funding lined up. You want to have your brokers there, and you want to be knowing what you're looking for. I think kind of solidifying your vision.
Okay.
You want to have these baselines, right? So you want to have 4 or 5 ops. You want to have it producing this much. You want to have these different opportunities for growth. Like Richard, for example, you could bring to a practice endo, implants, ortho, all these different avenues. So you almost are creating a profile of the practice that you want. So that way we've eliminated all the guesswork of what are we actually looking for. We've solidified it down. We have a profile of what we want. Now we're going to look for that. Obviously, that profile should be a little bit hazy to where a few practices could fit within that profile. Sure. But then as soon as we find one that fits all the criteria that you're looking for the bulk of it, you can send your LOI that day. Because like my students in Arizona right now, they found the perfect practice, but they weren't ready. And those practices keep getting swiped up, and they're like, dang it, we missed another one now that they have it figured out. But at the same time, I also tell people, don't stress, because just like shoes or a cell, there's always another pair, there's always another cell, there will always be another practice. So don't give up. It just is a matter of finding it in the area you want, at the time you want, at the price you want. But once you have all those things, you've got your clear vision. I'm very pro solidifying your vision, because once you know that, then you can hone in on what you want and pull the trigger.
Okay. And so if someone doesn't know, it sounds kind of weird, but if they don't know what they want, or maybe they think they know what they want, but they want to make sure that that's a good thing to want, if that makes any sense, they could talk with you or clarify with you, like, hey, this is what I think I want. Does this make sense? And am I crazy? So say that they've clarified with you their vision. Now they need to get lending in place. So the hard part in my mind is that it seems like lenders approve lending partially based on you, but also partially based on the practice that you're looking at buying. So would you choose a regional or national bank and kind of work everything up with them pre-buying a practice? And then, because there's no pre-qualified, like when you buy a home, you're pre-qualified. You can't technically do that with a practice. What can you do so that you have that relationship and that trust in place with a lender?
Well, it is tricky, because you're right. Sometimes you need to know what practice you're going for. Sometimes you can call and find out. Like right now, I know Wells Fargo is lending to students, and they're lending up to $325,000, and that's for the practice. So like I've got 2 dentists going in, and they can only get $325,000, even though there's 2 of them going in. There are other ones like Bankers Trust, which they will lend a lot, but it depends on if it's a small business or if it's another loan. But if you have a cosigner, then everything goes out the window and you can get whatever funding you want. And I know like other ones have written up very strong business proposals. These are my production reports. This is the practice I'm going to buy. This is how I'm going to pay back the loans. This is what I'm going to do. So it really just depends. I think getting involved with a bunch of different banks. Also, some brokers have their own lending company. So I would just do your homework, kind of get an idea and a baseline of what you're going for. Also, I know there's a student who's a third year right now who contacted some banks, told them his information, and they gave him ways of how he can increase his credit over the next year. So that way he can have a better opportunity to increase funding. And so, just kind of getting your ducks in a row But you don't even have to have your ducks in a row, truthfully. People lend. You can usually find a solution to those problems. And that's where I think it's good to have a good network and resource of people to reach out to. Like, hey, Kiera, I don't know where this is. Or, Mark Costas is a great resource, or these podcasts are great resources. But a lot of it's just, calling, going in and talking to it. The students are all having to go and figure it out. I mean, Sage told me I think she had 4 or 5 banks shut the door on her and say that they wouldn't lend to her, which is so silly because she's one of the best, most highest producing dentists that they could have ever lent to.
Right.
And, she just took in a really good business proposal and had a bank fund her. So
okay, so
there's so many different ways.
So maybe the idea would be, first off, I mentioned this in season 1, but I feel like it bears repeating here. There's a book called Never Eat Alone, and it's this book about networking and being able to reach out to people and how you can't be in this process, you can't be afraid of doing that. So you want to be reaching out to brokers and lenders and different people in this whole process, both to look for deals and to create that relationship and that foundation so that when you do have that deal, you can pull that trigger right away. And also so you can clarify what you will need. So your previous production reports, your business plan, your credit score, all these different financial things that banks are going to want. If you have all that ready, it's going to go quicker for you and it's going to be easier for you. And you still might get some no's, but at least you have different avenues open to you so that when 3 of them shut the door, you know where a 4th or a 5th one might be.
Right. And I just want to plug in another thing that's really, really beneficial is the reps, like Henry Schein reps, Patterson reps. Those people are so well connected as far as knowing about lending, about knowing about practices that are going up for sale, about where to get your supplies, because they're equally wanting your business as well. So reps, don't forget about the reps. They are amazing resources to have, and they're very well connected.
Okay. So reach out to all these people. And then once you're ready to pull the trigger, so now you submit an LOI. Now it's like, okay, crap, let's do our due diligence. What, from this point on, where do things get hung up and where have you seen them go well or go poorly?
I feel like that's a gray area because no matter how much due diligence you find and do and everything we put into place, you are going to find things, skeletons in the closet with every practice you buy. Mark and I buy practices regularly. And, it's like, oh, gosh, we didn't even see that. And so it's just a matter of accepting that you will have, I think the first 3 months of transition are crazy. They're hard. There's a lot of things going on, but you do your due diligence. You look through everything. You can never plan for the best. And so go through, I look at AR, I look at chart audits, I look at, the demographics, I look at how many dentists are around me. But realistically, I don't want to sound overly optimistic because I have seen practices plummet. I have seen practices not do well. So you want to make a good buy. But at the same time, you've got to put a lot of hard work and sweat equity into it. And that's just the nature of the beast. And it's fun and it's awesome and it's exhilarating. So you do your due diligence. You look at everything. You look at the equipment. You look to kind of plan the best you can. But similar with a house, when you buy a house, you have no clue what's really in the inner workings. So do the best you can and then wish on lots of stars and just jump. And it will work out.
Nice.
That's what I say. It will work out. So
nice. Well, any other advice for kind of that last phase of actually transitioning into the practice and getting things going once you've closed and things are wrapping up on the very tail end of things? Have you seen people, how do you like people to do it in terms of old doc out, new doc in, or overlap, or what do you see in that area?
That, once again, is a gray area. It depends on the practice and it depends on the provider. I do have pretty strong feelings of I don't usually love the old doc to stay on. I feel like a lot of times those are golden handcuffs that seem like they're going to be a great deal. But I feel like for the bulk that I've seen in my experiences, that's not usually the best thing. Now, don't take that as a standard.
Right.
It's never a good idea. But overall, I feel like I typically like the old doc out, the new doc in. A big thing to watch out for is making sure you can bill under the old doctor's license while you're getting credentialed. That's a huge hang up that I see that people miss, because if you don't have their license that you can bill under, I knew of a practice that didn't do that. And for 3 months, they couldn't see patients. They were out of network and their practice went down drastically because they lost all those patients. So those are some things.
How do you set that up? Like I don't even know, and that's something maybe I'll have to investigate further. How do you bill under the old doc's license?
You bill under, and it has to be in there. The only thing where it's a little concerning is if there's litigation, that dentist would be responsible. But it is a transitional period that those licenses have to be in place when you're transitioning. Otherwise, you can't bill insurance claims. So you just work that out between the doctor and the broker. And there was one practice that we were looking at that the doctor wasn't willing to do that, and we were going to walk because we're like, we can't feed the patients and keep the patient base going for 3 months while we get credentialed. It takes 3 to 6 months to get credentialed. And so
can people start on credentialing sooner if they know they're going to be using this, that, and the other insurance? And I guess that's the hard part, is you don't know what insurances are going to be at that practice.
And you have to have your tax ID set up to do your credentialing. You have to have your location to do your credentialing. And if there's someone out in this world that knows more about credentialing than I do, by all means, I feel like I've done it. I understand it pretty well. But if there's someone who knows how to do it better, of course, I hope that they would chime in and offer that resource. From what I know in my experience is you start day one as soon as you get into that practice, and you send off all your insurance information and you just follow up on it really quickly to make sure but having that other doctor's license to bill under is something that's very paramount.
Great. Okay,
I also am pretty pro on buying out the AR. I found that it's much easier to just buy out the AR and have that. So you're not trying to split hairs and split checks and figure out which insurance goes to which doctor, and making sure.
So to explain for people how that works is that that moment that the practice is sold, there are people who still owe money to the practice, and those are the accounts receivable. So that's like patients who have had work done but haven't paid for it yet, and you're saying you like to buy that from them. So it's like this theoretical pot of money that's 30 days old that people owe, or 60 or 90 days old, and you just like to buy it, and then you turn around and you guys collect the money. Is that what you like?
Right, and it works. Different brokers and different sellers do it differently, but I found it's just easier and cleaner for the books if you can buy out the AR. So you're not having to, because a lot of those accounts aren't that the patient didn't pay, it's that the insurance, we're still waiting on insurance, clearly, and so when that insurance comes in, on our first practice, we were having to try and separate out which doctor got which insurance and which insurance payment went to which doctor. So it just makes it a lot cleaner and easier if you can buy that AR and then you have your girls work hard on that AR to bring it in. It's also that residual income for you that's helping as you're transitioning in, because at least you're still getting that money coming into you, as opposed to all that money coming in goes to the other doctor. So you're not really collecting anything for the first little while. I just think it's easier if the AR can be bought with the practice.
And you're buying that for like a discount. So it's like you've got 30 days of AR that's owed to you and you buy that for like 70% of what it's worth, or is that how it works?
Pretty much, yeah. And you'll negotiate that with the doctor and the seller as far as what they're willing to sell your AR. I mean, I met a doctor the other day and she was adamant about not selling the AR, which to me kind of set up a red flag. Like, why wouldn't she want to do that? But I don't think it's necessarily negative. But if they're willing to sell the AR, it's a lot easier for both people. They get their money right away. You get the AR. You get to work it. You get to have people follow up on it. It's not that messy, dicey. Whose money is who?
Well, and you don't have to have someone who's kind of like in your practice still, but not in your practice.
Right. So, but it just depends. I mean, however it works initially. And I wanted to throw in a last key point, because I think we've made this seem a little like, if you don't have all these ducks in a row, then I can't ever buy a practice. And I don't ever want to give that mindset. I want people to feel very much empowered that, hey, you can buy a practice and there are people out there to help you, and there are resources there to help you get it. And even if you don't have every single one of these boxes checked, that's okay. We still can move forward. These are obviously great guidelines to get there, but I've seen people not even have their ducks in a row and be able to buy a practice and be very successful with it. So it's just a matter of, obviously, do your research, do your due diligence on your own at the beginning.
Sure.
But then believe that it's going to happen and go for it. Know you're going to work your tail off for the first little while. And it is not super easy, but it's so rewarding and it's so exhilarating and it's so fun to watch people get into these practices and just see them ignite, because you can crank the production. You are now in control of your own destiny. And that's why I
Sure.
think the buying of a practice is so rewarding for people.
Well, this has been awesome. This has been a great perspective on all of these different aspects of this season of the podcast. And you brought a lot to the table from your immediate experience that you've had in this last year and a half with current market conditions, with current dental students and associates and docs who are trying to do this and trying to make this leap. And you're holding their hand and you're helping them get through this. So if someone wanted to reach out to you, what email and even phone number, if you're comfortable, how should they get a hold of you, website, whatever you want to put out there?
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's kierasdentalconsulting.com. My name's a little tricky. So it's Kiera with an S, Kiera's Dental Consulting at gmail.com. The website's the same, kierasdentalconsulting.com. On my website, on that one and Dental Placement Pros, either one of those have areas where you can just select a time. And that way we can set up interviews. And my phone number's on there. It's 801-885-5351.
Awesome.
I'm not so busy that I don't have time for anyone. I never want to appear that way, but I do have a pretty tight schedule. So a lot of times booking on the website allows me to dedicate a half an hour of time for those consults. So you have your actual amount of time to ask all those questions and whatnot.
So that would be the right way to do it rather than just calling you every day for like 4 days like I did.
Richard, you did. I didn't even know who you were. No, absolutely.
Sorry.
You can always shoot me a text as well. I really want to be a good resource for people and offer as much as I can. Mark Costas and I have a really good philosophy. I mean, he's taught me so much, and I love to just share whatever we can to help people. I mean, if we don't have to give up the world of dentistry to corporate, I am all in favor of doing that. So whatever we can do to help out, we're all about doing that.
And that's truly, like, when I explain Mark Costas to someone, it blows my mind that he has so much going on at so many different levels, yet is so generous with his time and attention. And you never feel like he's like, oh, well, I don't have time for this, or like, I've got to cut my conversation with you short here. I got to run. He's just, when he's there and he's with you and he's talking with you, like, he's all in on you, and you never feel it blows my mind. I don't get it. You know, it's like someday maybe I'll have the ability to juggle that many things, but you are in good company, and I'm very, very excited for everything that you've done and everything that you've got going on here. So if anyone is hesitant to reach out to Kiera, don't reach out to her. She's awesome. I'm going to continue to bother her and call her at random times or set up podcast interviews at 4 a.m. So I really
absolutely clearly I will wake up at any time. I mean, I really do love dentistry, and I love the people that are a part of it. And I think we have such an amazing community that whatever I can do to add my hand to helping people, I am always there.
You're awesome, Kiera. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks for the invite. It's good to talk to you again.
Okay. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.
I hope that you guys enjoyed everything that Kiera brought to the table. I love that episode, and she's doing so much, and it's really exciting to see all that she's got going on. What's the thing that's most exciting for you, George?
I really liked what she's doing with Dental Placement Pros. I think it's so important for her to have started that with my dean, actually, and Mark Costas, because what they're focusing on is not only making sure that they're hooking up people who are looking for associates with potential associates, but they're also checking the incoming receiving practice and making sure that they have the capacity and the demand for an associate. And I think that's so important for people who are looking to work in private practice, is finding a practice that has a need for them. I think so many times there's a senior doc who brings in an associate that's not really needed, and it creates this dynamic that isn't healthy.
Oh, it's like the worst thing to be at an office that's too slow because there wasn't enough work for you, and they're taking the patients that probably should be going to you. That's an awful situation. So it's a huge value that they're bringing to the table by vetting everyone in the process.
Exactly. Vetting both sides. I think that's huge.
The other thing I like that she was very optimistic on aggressive early ownership, and loves helping people and structuring different ways that people can get into ownership straight out of dental school. So I thought that was awesome.
Yeah, especially for me, somebody who's going to jump right into ownership out of school, if things go my way. I think it's optimistic to hear her side of things, because so often I hear the other way where, wait a couple years and that kind of advice. So it was nice to hear her talk about how you don't realize how ready you may be for ownership.
No, absolutely. There was also some other little like minor pointers, like buying out the AR, the accounts receivable, and how to, buy that out versus just kind of collecting or letting them collect it. And then she also talked about insurance credentialing, which do you want to talk about that?
The thing is, Richard, it's kind of funny. We listened to that, and I think we both looked at each other and said, I don't think either one of us could talk about that because we don't really know a whole lot about it. And it inspired us to reach out to Marie Chatterley, who we're having on next week, to talk about insurance credentialing and that whole process of transitioning a practice and signing up with the insurances that they were signed up with and how that process goes. And I think there was a lot more to it than I thought. So I'm really happy that Kiera mentioned that so we could dive deeper into it.
And my favorite part of that was that I looked up and we have this spreadsheet where we keep track of all of our episodes and our podcasts. And you're like, yeah, have you listened to the Marie Chatterley episode yet? I'm like, what is this? And then I listened to it. I'm like, oh, you've already recorded this interview with this insurance credentialing person. And like, we brought it up like once and you like found her and took the initiative and did the interview and uploaded it. And I was like, this is why this is awesome that we're working together. So thank you for doing that. And I think people are going to get this little piece of knowledge that we wouldn't have gotten if Kiera hadn't brought that up. So I'm super happy that worked out.
I'm really excited for next week. I think our listeners are going to take a lot from that interview.
Cool. Well, thank you guys for joining us with the Shared Practices podcast. Please leave us a review on iTunes. Also, remember that we have a new resources page on our website. If you want to download any of the guides or PDFs that we've mentioned before, that all should be in there. Other than that, we'll talk to you guys next week. This has been Richard Lowe and
George Hariri.
Okay, talk to you soon. Bye.